Hey, everybody, and welcome to our next in our series of leadership lessons, conversations with incredible technology leaders and CEOs. I'm really happy and excited to have Leslie Stretch, the CEO of Medallia, here with us today. Hey, Leslie.
Hey, Jason, great to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, of course. And Medallia is a business that we've followed closely. We've learned a lot from, obviously, both in the space of getting customer feedback and employee feedback. And I'm just so interested to learn about, your team and what you're doing. I've been so impressed. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, this is a series that we do in combination with entrepreneur.com and Comparably, where we interview incredible CEOs like Leslie. I'm Jason Nazar. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Comparably. I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is the fifth company I've now started, had the pleasure of working with some really incredible people. I'm based in Southern California and a pretty active investor and board member in different technology companies. And I've always loved doing series like this because I've had the benefit and privilege of learning from amazing people like Leslie, who have been incredible mentors to me in my career. Comparably is an employee review platform where we try to showcase a fair and accurate portrayal of what it's like to work at tens of thousands of global companies. And so Medallia is certainly an organization that has an incredible culture, has a lot of overlap in what we do as a business. So as I said, just super excited to chat about what you're up to, Leslie. In your own words, and thank you again for being here with us. How do you talk about and explain Medallia's business today?
Well, great. Thanks for having me, Jason. Congrats on your success with Comparably. Medallia is about feedback. It's about tapping into the voice of what I call the silent majority. It's not just a survey play. That we live in a world where there's lots of survey companies with very simple analytics. We're about capturing all kinds of information, unsolicited digital information, all kinds of social media information, all kinds of other signals that give us insight and feedback, and synthesizing that feedback and turning it into business and organizational and cultural insights that are real time and can make a big impact. And our belief is feedback makes us better, but we need to serve it up in the right way to the right people. We need to curate it, and we need to establish feedback that can connect to action. And so we're leveraging massive digital resources, a huge platform, a huge Silicon Valley technology platform to collate and collect, curate, analyze, understand, and distribute that feedback to people that are working with you, serving you in some capacity, selling you something, making you something that can do it better. Simple as that, leveraging digital technology to turn feedback into real action. And it's so far it's working.
Yeah. You've had this incredible B2B story, successfully went public a couple of years ago. A lot of people don't often even realize when they're interacting with you. Like, I'll stay at, the Wynn Hotel and I'll get the survey afterwards and you're powering it. Like, can you talk about, some of the global brands that you work with and how you're powering the experiences that they're having with their customers to get that feedback?
Sure. Actually, we're very well known in the hospitality space. Our first customer, who just renewed for a bunch of years last year, is Hilton. But we have 70% of the Strip, Vegas Strip that you mentioned, like the Wynn, partners like the Wynn MGM on the platform. And they're using not just survey, but they're monitoring your digital footprint, your physical footprint in the moment to create a better experience. But that sector, that travel and hospitality sector, was really challenged in the pandemic, seriously challenged. And we stuck with them. We've stuck with them because they're our heartland customers. But that same service culture through feedback has been taken to retail, websites, banking, financial services, to government. So we're working with the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, to collect ideas and feedback. We're working with the biggest banks in the world. We have massive scale. One of our banks has 30 million customers interacting through our mobile app, giving us feedback or giving them feedback on the fly constantly. We're working with, you name them, best banks in the world, biggest in the world, biggest insurance companies like State Farm. We just signed on Volvo Cars. This is all public. Volvo Cars in Europe. We've got M&S in the UK. Just great brands across all industries and into public sector as well around the world. So we're very fortunate and very excited to be in all of those industry segments.
Yeah. You brought up something twice now that just struck such a chord with me, which is, such a value of what you do is to capture the feedback from the silent majority. The inherent challenge of getting reviews and getting feedback from your customers or from your employees is that it's always the angriest or most aggrieved party that has the largest incentive to leave feedback, and often ones that do it publicly, right? The big reason I started Comparably was to have a more fair alternative to platforms that came before us, because it's hard to understand what it's really like to work at a company. As you think about how you take a lead on really trying to unlock that feedback from the silent majority, like how do you think about that, both from Medallia, but also just overall kind of philosophically for, one of the leaders of capturing customer and employee sentiment?
Well, I think this is at the heart of the issue. And I think, to be honest, anyone can do simple survey software and send out surveys. I just got actually from a major brand a survey, and they sent me $1 to fill $1. So I'm going to give this $1 to my youngest child who buy a quarter of a Starbucks with it. But what a primitive way to talk to your customers. And I think that you see there is actually a very close correlation between public angry feedback and negative and value compromising feedback, and companies who have no way to dialogue at scale with customers and employees. They're on the annual survey thing. We'll do an annual survey, an annual 360, whatever. And those companies that haven't invested in that feedback technology see a very high proportion of public angry feedback. And because their customers are frustrated, and actually the companies themselves do want to talk and listen, but they don't open any channel. And so with Medallia, we can open, sure, a survey channel, we can open an explicit interactive digital channel, or we can look at the digital exhaust that we emit in our daily lives, or we can look at the physical behavior of customers in their transactions and synthesize a point of view there that actually addresses the issue before it spills over in public. And that's a huge benefit to people that have invested in the technology. And it's still, Jason, a minority of the world that have invested appropriately in this technology. It's still a small story, all right? There are 10 million enterprises registered around this globe that could be using this technology. We've got 1,800 customers on annual contracts today. The survey companies have lots more survey customers, but they're general purpose market research survey players. They're not as focused on the digital story that we're interested in.
Yeah, I think the holy grail continues to be, how do you get that silent majority of your customers and of your employees and your stakeholders to really give you the feedback that you need to both improve as an organization, but also reflect where you are doing, well and exceeding.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
So, you've got this incredible career, Leslie. You've been a leader and a sales leader at world-class organizations for, decades. You talked about being a public company CEO. I think you said, was it 56
quarters? Yeah.
Quarters in a row? That's incredible. I wouldn't have believed that looking at you to start. If someone at an earlier stage or a mid-level of their career came to you and asked you to be their mentor and said, hey, Leslie, what's been the overall secret to success in your career? I want to be a public company CEO. I want to be a C-level executive at a large-scale tech company. What did you do different and better than your peers that has let you have as much success as you've had?
Oh, well, I think I have many peers. First of all, I have a very good team that was with me in my prior public company. So I have a great team. And that is a big secret, right? So I have a great team. So it's not really about me. I'm more of a conductor in this regard now. I'm more of a coach. But there are many peers of mine who I look up to who I think are incredible public company CEOs and founders and public company CEOs too. So I always consider myself a work in progress, and that I haven't peaked yet. If you ask any of my family, they'll agree with that. I've definitely not peaked yet. But I think there are some things I've learned, and I'm probably a bit of a slower burn in the way that I do things than many people. And I guess one of the things I wish I had done is move a lot faster. And companies are people. At the end of the day, that's all you've got. You and I make, our living from selling electrons. If you think about it, we don't have finite inventory either, right? So we don't have a lot of cars on the lot and then suddenly we have none and the price goes up. We have infinite inventory, and that's an interesting economic conundrum that we have to deal with. But, I think I wish I'd moved faster always. I think in my 20s, we can come back to that one because that's a bit more complex. But in my 30s, for me, the key that I uncovered a few things, a few secrets. One of them was, I was brought up by a single mother, so I didn't have a father present in my life. But one of my first bosses, it was in my 30s that I really understood the importance of this company, and it was at Oracle. This company was paying me to do something. In this case, I'd transitioned from actually being a product builder and a coder to a seller, which was an interesting transition. But they were paying me for loyalty to them and work for them. And I had a very interesting sit down with my manager, a guy called Peter Dixon, who's unfortunately passed away now. He was one of my first managers. He was the first person in my life that explained loyalty to me. And that made a huge difference in my personal relationships and in my work relationships, that I could see he was hurt, that he thought I would leave him and leave his business unit, and that I was disloyal because I was getting poached to another business unit in Oracle. I ended up staying with him for 9 years. But that was an important watershed for me. That was very important. But there have been many others, and I haven't had one sort of mentor, and I'm not a finished article either. I'm tapping into networks and people like you and people all the time and listening to them. I don't really believe in the one mentor has all the answers. I did have a great chairman in my prior company, Chuck Bosenberg, who was a kind of veteran from Apple, who was a super guy that I would meet once a month with. We'd have breakfast. He was a great guy, and I trusted his judgment. It was always sound. And we have a super lead here on the board in the shape of really our lead investor in Sequoia, Doug Leone, who's a phenomenon. And so there's lots of, I wish I'd met him 10 or 20 years ago, that's for sure.
Yeah. Part of the advice I always share to people when they come to me with career decisions, like, hey, I'm trying to decide between these two jobs, is I say, make a bet on people. It's exactly what you just said, kind of that concept of loyalty. And I think one of the things that's lost today is because there's so much career opportunity for people in our space and everyone's always getting poached. Like if someone that hitched their wagon to your train, like imagine all the doorways that you would have opened up for them, whether it was at your companies or somewhere else. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's lost for a little bit is candidates making a bet on people, just in the same way Warren Buffett is investing in managers of companies, right? Not in what he thinks is going to be the fastest growing stock. I think one of the things that's missed is candidates making a bet on those folks. You talked about being raised with a single mom. What was your motivation early on? Like, did you grow up with any means? I know you've got a lot of kids, so I don't know if you came from a big family too. Like I was one of 4. Early on, like where did you grow up and what was your motivation to kind of do something big and special? Where did that come from?
Yeah, sure. So I am an identical twin. I have a twin brother, and we have an older brother. So my mother, who's a 5 foot Scottish woman, she's American, she's a little woman but very strong. She brought us up, and so we were pretty competitive, but we had a big need for money because we had none. We didn't own a home as a family. We really wanted to taste life and have the best things we could in life and be able to travel and enjoy our life without the worry of the economic issue of making ends meet. And so that was a very powerful driver for us, and still is in many regards, because we can do so much with it. So that was a big motivator for me. And also I started in the industry at a time when there was no packaged software. The cloud was a gleam in somebody's eye, not even, it was way ahead of that. I started in 88 or something, 87. And my tutor, economics tutor at university, was a guy called Mike Kelly, who was actually he was doing his job as a tutor just as a favor to the University of Strathclyde in Scotland because he was very well off. In fact, he became the Lord Mayor of Glasgow, the Provost of Glasgow, and he owned Glasgow Celtic. He owned the soccer club at one point. But when I was leaving university, I walked into his room and said, "What do I do with an economic history degree?" And he said, "You buy one of these." And he lifted from his desk a Commodore 64. And so I borrowed £200 to buy a Commodore 64. And I never looked back. I learned BASIC, I learned Pascal, and I never looked back from that moment. So that was I've been very lucky, actually. It was a lucky break for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're the second guest. So the previous guest we had on was the CEO of Trinet, and he's had this incredible career as a sales leader, right? Amazing run at Trinet as a public company CEO, but he started off as an engineer too. Like, I'm curious to get your take. What was that transition like as you went from, as you said, product and then the engineering side into sales? And people often think of salespeople as, innately being born that way. I often say, like, look, it's a learned behavior like anything else.
Yeah.
How was the transition for you from product and engineering into sales? And what do you think helped you figure out that side of the work equation, equally as well?
Well, I think I couldn't agree more with you that it is a learned behavior. In my final year at university, just before that pivotal meeting, another tutor was going around the tutorial group. There was 10 of us. And he went to each one of them saying, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do with your degree?" And he came to me and said, I think you're going to end up working in a museum or a library, somewhere where there's not too many people and it's quite quiet. Because I was an introvert. I am an introvert, actually. I find just I always get nervous about a social occasion or a public speaking event. It always makes me a little anxious. It's a terrible weakness. But I started as a programmer and I went to London. I mean, I was living off of a student grant of about £1,000 a year or something, what, 1,500
Wow.
something like that. And somebody walked into our milk round, the annual hiring spree, and offered me £10,000 to move to London to be a programmer. And I was like, I'm on the next train. And I was on the next train, literally. And I then spent 3 or 4 years writing millions of lines of code, because in those days you weren't building products. It was bespoke. If you think of every industry, it starts bespoke. The tailoring business, there's no such thing as an off-the-peg suit. Well, software started out as a bespoke industry, and we were writing to spec. We were actually reinventing the wheel. We'd go from Shell to the Consumers Association, to a ball bearing company, to a shipping company, and we'd write the same CRM, the same financial, and every one of them thought they were unique. Of course, we now know their needs were actually fairly utilitarian and fairly straightforward, commoditized. But I realized, watching the guys that were selling the projects, they had the nicer cars, they had the better suits, they had the expense accounts, and they seemed not to do very much for their money, which turned out to be a mistaken impression. And so I moved into sales, and I hated it to begin with, and I was very poor at it. I was not very good at all, but I inherited, when I joined Oracle, a lucky territory from a lady who had retired called Claire Wells, who was a wonderful executive. And I took her out to lunch and asked her to help me contact all of her network. In my first year in Oracle, I did about £2.5 million worth of licenses, but I really owe every penny of my commission to Claire Wells. And so I had a lucky break. And then I stayed. I realized that salespeople, a company's a pyramid, and salespeople can walk up the outside of the pyramid. As a product person, you tend to be chiseling through, doing all the hard work. But that brings me to Medallia, where I think our product people and engineers are gold. They are absolutely golden. And we need to make sure that everybody in the company gets that same economic opportunity and share. And we're trying to do that as best we can.
Yeah. For those folks that are thinking about, a career in sales and sales leadership, what for you are the key tenets? For those of us that are obviously running SaaS businesses, like having effective organizations and effective individual contributors is, so key in addition to the product. What do you feel like, if you were giving somebody coaching or advice on how to excel in their sales career, what would you tell them?
Well, it's interesting. It's a fascinating, world, the sales world. And I think the main thing is, America leads the pack in terms of the coaching and development of salespeople. If you look outside of our sector, if you take insurance, there are people you'll know, insurance brokers and agents and salespeople that have 10, 20, 30, 50-year careers because their customers trust them. And I think a lot of people think it's about the pitch. And I think, actually anyone can be a great salesperson if they tell lies or they misset expectations or they try and fool people into a contract. So it's about integrity, number one, and also you have to believe in what you're selling. You really have to believe in what you're selling. And software is imperfect. It's never complete. It can always be better. But I think that integrity piece is more important than it. And it's every job is important, it's very important. I think the second thing is persistence, right? And persistently working with your customers and showing them something new, showing them value quickly, and don't waste their time. Tell them the story quickly, but listen as much or twice as much as you talk. And I think those are some of the things that are important, but tenacity and dealing with rejection, starting in telesales or virtual sales, I used to do 150 calls a day and I might get one or two meetings. Jason, if I got two meetings, I would be having cocktails. That would be a result, And so, persistence and really make your own leads. Don't wait for the claw to deliver your leads and your opportunity. Make as much of your own as you can and be creative and persistent and keep mentally steady because selling can be a very volatile world because 1 minute you're winning, 1 minute you're losing, or you have a fallow period and then your confidence gets hit. All of that happens in long sales careers to every salesperson. Don't worry about it. Just stay the course, but listen carefully. And the last thing I'll say is work out the implications for the business that you're talking to of the product or service that you're selling. The best, most powerful question is the needs payoff question when you say to people, if you don't have comparably, how are you going to really listen to the employee base in a safe way, give them a safe space? If you don't have Medallia, then is feedback, do you believe in feedback? What are the implications for you as a business if you're not listening at scale to your customers because your competitors are? So the needs implications question dialogue is really important. I mean, I could tell you loads of things I think. These are just some of the things I think, but I'm always listening to other people in sales. I'm one of the weaker negotiators and weaker salespeople we have in the company. Fortunately, we have some stellar high integrity performers. So.
Yeah. Well, you just taught me something. I love the means implication gradient. And if you don't have the solution, how do you accomplish X? I think that's a great tool for anyone to use. If we go up the ladder a bit here, does anything really prepare you to be a public company CEO? Like once you stepped into that position for the first time, like what maybe did best prepare you in your career for a journey like that? And is it just one of these things that, like many things in life, you got to live through and go through before you really understand the ins and outs of it?
I definitely think, I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. So in sales, I wanted to be a manager. Every year I would get twice the quota and half the territory and someone else was in control. And actually when you control, the control is linked inextricably to stress. The less control I have, the more stressful things are for me. And I think that's true for a lot of people. But I wanted to lead a business and put my ideas into it, but also conduct and orchestrate the ideas of others and turn them into value because every piece of software has ROI. We just have to find it. All software has an ROI. All software reduces time to do something, saves money, saves effort, creates insight, all software. And so I just wanted to be able to control my destiny and to lead and to express my creativity, but also to be able to coach people and get coaching from them. But my background is single parent, reared in Scotland, out of really a very poor background economically, not in any other way. And also I went to a Scottish boarding school, which was hard as nails. Every day was a fight. And when you're public, not everybody's your friend. You have the competitive enemy. You have, and I don't really believe in this. You know, I know only the paranoid survive and all that. I don't really subscribe to that, because the paranoid state is not a nice one, right? You're constantly under stress. So don't be paranoid, and don't follow and copy the competition, because the best you'll ever be is as good as them. Meanwhile, the market moves on. So don't be paranoid in a paranoid state, but be ready for a fight, and be ready for the public investor to confront you and challenge you on a daily basis. And they're actually your friends, and they put their money to work with you, and they expect a return. And that's your number one job in a public company, is to get them that return. But partner with them. I've partnered for nearly 2 decades with some really smart investors that, you know, I intend to return their money and more at a massive multiple. And so it's actually, but remember, you can be confronted every day by your customers, by your team, by your investors. And you do have to be ready for the left field confrontation. You do have to be ready for that, and you do have to be prepared to fight your corner, and don't get pushed down into their view of thinking, and don't follow a cookie cutter view of what a cloud company should be. That's the fatal mistake. Work on the metrics that matter to you, right? For you, it might be review count or whatever. For us, it's feedback, response rates, it's things like that. Work on the things that matter to you, not to a broad-based investor who's working off of a cookie cutter template, but make sure you engage them.
Yeah. It feels like the public markets have evolved so quickly these last couple of years. You know, how has the experience been for you of when you first took that seat as a public company CEO to today? I can't imagine that, like, the challenges and the board that you're playing on even feels very different over the last decade.
It's very different, and it's very different, especially now in the last year and a half, where you've got this phenomenal change in valuations to the upside. Now we're seeing some tech compression for a bit here. And you've got this rise of a retail connected virtual retail investor that is creating missions. You know, look at the GameStop mission and so on, and that's gone on. The rise of, you know, we have 100 cryptocurrencies out there. You know, where does it all fit together? How do I play this? You know, you're seeing companies putting crypto on the balance sheet, and their valuations getting connected to crypto. And so, you know, do you get into that? Do you do what do you do? And so it's really changed. And I think it's changed for the investor psyche too. And the biggest thing I think is that there's still the hardcore long-term players, but there's many, many more people for whom 2 quarters is long-term, 6 months, and 90 days is long-term. And so it's changed. But the availability of investable capital in the US is incredible, you know, and it's bizarre, actually. Even with the pandemic, it's been an incredible situation. And so it's actually a great time to be running a tech company. It's an exciting time. It's also, innovation has changed. The innovation landscape and the technology available to us to innovate has changed dramatically. So I think it's the best time. So certainly the best time of my life. It's the most interesting and exciting phase of my little career.
Yeah. You brought up early on, you know, your role being the conductor and this amazing team you have. I remember a piece of advice I got early on when I had a previous startup before this that I sold to Intuit. And I had an investor and board member tell me at the time, and this is when I was maybe 28 years old. He said, "Your job, Jason, as CEO, is not to do any work." And I thought, man, you're crazy. Like, you don't have the work ethic anymore. And this was a really hardworking, successful individual. And it's what it took me a long time to learn was, you know, if you do the doing as a leader, then you're the bottleneck for the company, right? And there's this natural challenge, especially with founders, because earlier on you're rewarded for the Superman complex of all the things you can do, right? The early investors bet on you because you've made so much happen out of so little. And even as your team is in the formative stages of 25, 50, 100, 200 folks, what you do and what you can execute on is a meaningful driver of where the business is going. And then, you know, there's the position that you're in. You know, it's like, how do you think about being this effective conductor. And what does that mean? Like, how should folks think about that transition if they've been the doer and they've been rewarded for that in their career? Like, how does one both become and excel as that conductor in an organization?
Well, I think, once again, there are some amazing examples out there. If I look at what Tim Cook does at Apple, it's, he's harnessing, putting together, building and conducting a phenomenal team. If I look at that's what I want to do. I want to have that. I am lucky to have core medallions that have been in the company since day one on my team, and some great executives that I brought from a tried and tested private to public to exit situation in my prior company. And so I'm very fortunate to have that team. So for me, every day that it's full of wonder seeing how these people operate and some of the achievements that they create. For our company, just to be specific, Forrester published their customer experience wave today, their annual exercise, and they're a very well respected firm, and they're objective. And my team have produced a fantastic outcome from Medallia. You should see it. It's why I love it. It's wonderful. Things like that go on all the time. The innovation that they create and the way they turn that innovation, that code, into deals and value for customers, I love. So I'm in a lucky position, but that means you have to look at the corner cases. You have to look at the issues of, do they work together well? Do they gel as a team? Are they high integrity? Are there any things we need to look at there or worry about? And do they have the right energy level to take this to where we know we're okay now, but we want to be $1 billion SaaS company and a $10 billion cloud business and so on. And we want more money to come in that we can spend on our people and products. That's what it's all about. Money's just energy. And so you look at those corner things all the time, make sure that the chemistry between the players isn't going out of shape. You make sure that the integrity doesn't go out of shape and that the energy levels don't drop. And that's as much as I know. I mean, I'm still learning, and I'm learning how to coach them and how to give them feedback and how to take it as well. It's important that we take it. I'm probably not the best at that. I should do a lot better. So I'm listening and learning all the time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that statement you made. You slipped it in there. Money is just energy. I think that's an amazing quote. When you think of your short list of qualities that you're looking for in team members that you bring onto Medallia, right? If you said, hey, these are the 3 or 4 most important things every medallier has. I don't know if they're called medalliers. I'm just making that up. Medallites. Medallions, of course. What are the values and qualities that you're most proud of that your team has, and what are the things that you're looking for as you bring somebody onto your leadership team? What's most important for you, as you expand this team?
Well, we touched on some of it. I mean, I think it's very important for them to be great experts in their domain, to be content experts in the domain, but it's actually more important, if they're not that, to be great coaches and to share my philosophy, which is, I don't really believe in management and I don't really believe in performance management at all. And I know there's other CEOs who would think I'm soft. I'm not soft at all. I just don't believe in traditional line of sight management in the 21st century. I believe in coaching. If you take it down a level, when you say to a team, the worst 3 or 4 words in the English language you can say to any team are, meet your new manager, right? Because they want to know what's in it for them, right? What value does this person add to their role, especially in the industry that you and I work in, where we've already passed the bar, the intellectual bar, right? We know that we're getting smart people to come in. So why would we try and manage them? And so they have to be a great coach. They have to know their domain if they can, but being a great coach is better. And they have to have the integrity piece absolutely built in. And they have to understand loyalty to their team results in loyalty to them as well. And they have to, that philosophical mindset. They might not express it in the same way, Jason, as I am, and they might have a different way of using the language, and that they are completely blind to talent, right? So that they are non-judgmental about any other aspect of a person other than their ability to do this job. And in the virtual world, that is so much easier, actually. It's really quite good. You get away from a lot of the interference that clouds your judgment. And they have to bring teams with them.
Mm-hmm.
They have to bring teams with them. They have to have that. Those are some of the things, the energy that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Can you break down a little bit more? I love that. What do you feel are the big differences between what a traditional line of sight manager does day to day or historically did versus a coach? Like if you had to break down, these are the specific things that a coach is successfully doing versus a line of sight manager. What is that for you?
The line of sight manager tends to be a performance manager that reports on metrics, and they're reporting the story. They're not actually on the field helping the team create the story. And so they tend to spend more time managing upwards. And that's fine if the team is baked and fantastic and they're all A players. I've never met a team like that. It's the 80-20 rule. 20% are A players, actually 60% are B, and the rest are C's, And so every team has that set up because of the time and role. There's natural reasons why you don't always have a full complement of A players. It can happen, but it's very rare. And so when you recognize that, the implication is you have to be coaching and watching the team, right? That's absolutely key. And the traditional performance manager is more about reporting the numbers than making them. And that's the big difference. And they're political, and they tend to want themselves to come out on the right side of a situation, regardless of the outcome for the company or their team. And I'm just not into that. I had a manager, a boss once, who turned out to be a mediocre success in the industry, nothing special, who said to me, the fields of Flanders are full of the corpses of dead English heroes. Quite a quote, isn't it? Quite a quote. And he said, don't be a hero. You don't want to be a hero. You want to ride on the backs of other people, great people. And I said to him, and how do we get those great people? Right? Because my fundamental philosophy is that one woman or one man can do what another can do if they're given the right set of circumstances and the right coaching and support. And there's plenty of people who argue with me on that. I'll never be shaken from that. I absolutely believe that is core to my thinking. And so once you establish that and you realize that you've got A, B's, and C players, and you yourself have to be part of their success, it just changes the whole game. That's what differentiates or separates the performance manager of old, or line of sight manager of old, as we put it, from the modern coach.
Yeah. I'm going to share something with you that I'm currently struggling with, and I'd love to get your advice because I'm sure lots of other people are too. So this is my fifth startup now, and I've always run companies where people were together in a physical location. One of the things I prided myself on in my 20s and 30s is we had this office where people would spend 12 hours a day. And it is absolutely clear to see that the world has changed. We are now a virtual company. We're hiring people all over, North America for Comparably. And I don't know that folks are going to go back to a traditional 9 to 5 office, let alone startup hours of, 9 to 9. I think it's better for most people in their individual lives. And I think it's actually better for companies because you get a wider access to a talent pool. I also really feel like there's a certain magic that's being lost, like the camaraderie of being together, of the ease of just turning to somebody and asking a question, the magic of being in a physical presence. And I also wonder, what's going to be the longer term consequences of people spending the majority of time with each other on screens and in their home environments where there are other competing pressures. And I think that companies are going to start to lose a lot of talent. There's actually a lot of discussion right now from public company CEOs about a worry that there's going to be a massive amount of people voluntarily leaving organizations just because the job market is hot for our industry, and it's easier than ever, especially when you're at home, just to do something else. And I think that was a lot I threw at you, right? So what I'm trying to figure out, I'm asking advice on is like, how do you see this shaping up? What's going to be the right model of work going forward? And how are we going to balance the needs and desires of team members and employees with the needs and desires of what businesses and companies will need to be competitive and be successful for the goals that they have stated?
Well, this is the key agenda item for leaders like you and for me. And at the moment, the world has obviously changed, and I think that you look at the physical, commercial or corporate real estate world. It's very interesting. I have some major clients in that space and talk to them all the time. On Sunday evening, I took my wife and the two younger children for the Mother's Day dinner, which was fabulous, in Hyde Street in Russian Hill, and all the restaurants that were spilling onto the street were packed. And it was a thriving inner city. It was like an Italian hillside of restaurants. It was quite interesting. And then I went for the first time in 15 months into our Market Street office. The last time I was there was our earnings call, March 3rd, a year ago. And the downtown of San Francisco was about at 10% traffic and occupation from where it normally was. And it felt eerie and odd. But also I polluted the atmosphere in a car going there. I wasted 2 hours messing around in traffic and just getting down to the city and walking around and doing nothing productive. And I met with a bunch of people who I hadn't seen for over a year, but I'd seen every day on Zoom, who were concerned to be in the office and who still were concerned. And, we have had, as many people have had, connected people to us that have lost people in this pandemic. And so people are rightly nervous, even though everybody was double vaccinated. So where is it going to go from here? Now you've got young people who are sitting on their bed working, which I hate. I want them to have a place. I just saw an announcement of a hub opening up in Tahoe, right in North Star Village, for people to go in and work and Wi-Fi, for people that want to go there. We've seen the rural move, the shift, the inverted real estate market in rural. The East Bay up here has gone crazy. So is Tahoe and everywhere else. Where do we end up? And I actually think we're going to have, this is a small slice of time, and the human condition is built to work with other people and collaborate and be together. I don't want to give up the gains of being off the planes, right? And I'm sorry for the people that are in the airline business and so on. I'm sure they'll have strong businesses with consumer traffic, but we've separated productivity from carbon emissions. I'm worried we're going to give that up and go back on the planes to get that feeling of camaraderie and community. But I don't relish going back on a 10-hour flight to do 2 half-an-hour meetings when I can do, 10 or 20 Zooms in that time. I do think you can collaborate. We in our last publicly announced quarter did a record number of go lives in the quarter, all virtual. We know we can work and grow and succeed virtually, but I think, Jason, it's going to be some kind of, and hedging my bet, some kind of physical hybrid where we'll have intense, what I do think, when we go back to our club trip in Hawaii or we go back to a company meeting, it's going to be shorter, it's going to be more intense, and it's going to be rich, and we're going to love it. But we're going to want to get back to managing and controlling our time. I think people now have more control of their time than ever. And I know you're working as hard as you ever were, and I'm sure everybody incomparably is working as hard as ever, and everybody listening is, and I trust them to do it. So for me, I'm all in on a virtual future that has some collaboration opportunity, but more for celebration, right? More for communication. And I'm going to tell our team, you work from anywhere, and you tell me when you want to meet, if you want to do the physical meetings, and we'll create the space for that.
Yeah, it poses to me some interesting philosophical questions too. I think, and I never really wade into politics on the show, and this certainly isn't it, but I don't think anyone would disagree that, we have a massive divide between the haves and have-nots. Yes, and I think one of the things I think about too is, and you brought up the example perfectly, right? There are all these small businesses that are struggling just to survive and that are opening their doors and are overflowing. we're now going to create even more of a divide where your customers, these folks in retail, right, they're going to have an employee base that's expected to be at a physical location every day. Sometimes, right, they're employing folks that are not on the higher end of the earning potential for certain, more blue collar jobs. And then we've got knowledge workers that not only are the ones that are typically more rewarded financially, but now are going to have this unique flexibility and when and how they work that many of them had before that, right? Obviously, this is not the beginning of remote work. It's just an acceleration of it. And I think it poses some interesting societal questions too of how we're going to have these different kind of populations of folks that have very different experiences when it comes to work.
I think that is absolutely a key insight, and and my personal view is that Robert Reich's book, the survival of capitalism depends on a much fairer distribution of wealth, is actually right, and it's not popular to say that. I'm a Californian that I'm not a Californian that complains about my taxes. I'm staying here. I'm invested here. I would like them to be more efficient and smartly used. I would like them to improve infrastructure, but I'm not going to complain about that. But the implication is that we need to recognize that whilst people working physically in a store or in a restaurant or in a hotel or on an airline are not first responders, the order of priority is that we need to make sure we should pay for that, is what I'm trying to say, right? We should pay for their physical connection and the risks that they're taking. And right now, we're frankly not, right? And so that means you need to think about the restaurant experience. It's more than just a meal out now, right? It's somebody who's putting themselves in a position where they're serving you, they're putting in the physical endeavor and perhaps some risk, or they perceive some risk to serve you, right? To serve you and I. And so how do we think about that? So there has to be some change in equity. There has to be something. And I do think that the gap between the haves and the have-nots and the way you subtly moved it into that virtual physical world, I was talking to a couple of CEOs of construction companies, and they're like, I wish you guys would stop talking about virtual work. I need people to come into the office. I need to come to the construction site. Same for airlines, same for hotels. We've got to make a deal there, especially in my company and in yours, I think to quite a degree. We've got to make a deal where they see we understand that and acknowledge it and support it. I think it's massive. To me, I think the people that work in Marriott and serve me every time I go there, the people that work in Delta and serve me every time I go on a plane, to me, they're like first responders. They're very valuable, and I think we need to do more. I'm happy to pay up. I hope everybody else in our sort of position is happy to pay up.
Yeah. Well, let's transition. I'd love to chat a little bit more about Medallia and some of the things that you're working on now in the future. It's interesting because, we have a SaaS product that is largely driven by a survey that companies send to their employees. But I always try to remind our team about this. We're not in the business of helping companies get deep, meaningful insights. That's really what, Medallia does so well. Comparably is all about helping companies have a more fair and accurate public reputation. Everything we do is around when a job seeker or an employee is Googling a company that they can see the most detailed and fair information. When someone's reading a press article, they can see the companies that are best in class for what they do. Many people now know that for the last year, in addition to employee data, we've actually been capturing customer data on Comparably. And so we publicly showcase companies' NPS and different, facets of their brand and how people rate them. As you think about what separates you and Medallia from a busy, crowded space of a lot of folks that are in the survey business, and Qualtrics just recently went, from private to public, which is a journey you have a lot of familiarity with. And so I'd love to get your take on that experience. What do you think are the things that really distinguish Medallia as kind of a world-class organization? I know you've talked about your product and technology. What do you feel like is your big differentiator from everyone else in the space?
So I think, first of all, it's our people. We won't do and say anything to get a deal, right? We've got a point of view that is is important to us, and it goes back to this idea that feedback makes you better. The response rates of survey-only businesses, and they're good companies and they do good things, but they're really market research-oriented, general-purpose survey businesses. Response rates on surveys are low, right? The survey alone as a signal is not a high-fidelity signal about your customer or your employee. And it's often very intermittent or used once a year in some cases. That's not listening at scale. We're about listening at scale. We're about, you go and get your vaccine in CVS and you can leave feedback, and we can route that feedback to the person that actually gave you the shot. We can route the feedback to the person that can act on it. And maybe it's just a thank you. Maybe it was a great experience. You know, CVS actually used video recently. They used our video capability to have people, customers who've been in the pharmacy for a shot for a COVID-19 vaccine, and they used that to great effect. Actually, the overwhelming majority of feedback was positive because they'd opened a channel, a creative channel for feedback, not just a question and answer survey. Surveys are inherently biased. They're human intervention. We're asking a human to frame a set of questions at a certain point in time. Whereas the ability to gather social media data, other data, digital exhaust that we emit as we transact, move around applications and websites, to take that and synthesize a powerful insight is important. If you're a bank and you've got a mobile app and someone can't photo their paycheck or they can't complete a loan application, you want to know about that now. Sending them a survey after you've left the website or the app is pointless. And so we've got a lifetime interaction, lifetime intervention, and that's really what separates us. And we've also invested disproportionately in our platform. And so we, many times, as you'll find, I mean, as I'm sure you know, is people want to bring to market companies that then harvest what they have. That's really not us. We're about building, even in the public markets. And so we're building this deep digital platform that is going to have a huge impact on our marketplace over time. And that's a slightly different philosophy. So we've acquired technologies, we've built technologies, we've built more than we bought actually. And whereas the other survey-oriented businesses have been somewhat more static, and I'll call out the Forrester Wave again because that just was published and they seem to get that. You can see how we are laid out versus some of the other players, which I'm very thankful for. But that's a reflection of the team's investment in innovation, which is very real. To us, that's more important than the quarter. Quarters are important. Public company quarters are vital. But innovation for the long term is actually much more important.
And I know a big focus of what you're doing now is around the employee experience too. How do you think about that marrying? Like, you know, one of our stated goals is to be the leader in everything employer branding. And a lot of what I often talk about is I'm not sure that employer brand is going to be a term that people talk about in 5 years today, because a company's brand is really one thing. And how the experience that their customers have are more and more being blended with how people see that company as an employer, right? Mark Benioff talks about an organization as, you know, a holistic entity that's there for the community, for stakeholders, for public investors, for their employees. And so it's all kind of blending together. What do you think is the secret sauce of being able to capture both that employee feedback and customer feedback and give those insights to your customers?
So, well, I think that Benioff is a superb leader, and he was at the forefront of all of this. Much underrated actually, in terms of how he's looked at the world and brought the cloud movement to where it is today. And for us, there's a huge theme around this junction between employee and customer. And today we've got probably 1,800 or so customers on annual contracts. About 130, 140 of them have now adopted our platform for employee feedback. They want that same lifetime interaction. But at the moment, there's a disjunction. There's this great tool set that people can use for their customer feedback, and they're still doing the annual 360 or the annual survey, or maybe in COVID, a quarterly pulse, if you want to come back to the office, whatever. They're not really listening at scale and creating safe spaces for their employees to provide their thoughts and feedback. And so why would you give your customers an iPhone and give your employees a telex machine? And the junction is this. if you're able to see the customer feedback in an experience, and then you can see the employee, whether it's me or one of my colleagues that served that customer, and then you can look at their feedback trended over time, you can understand the human role in that customer experience very clearly. And the return on investment, the ROI on that, is massive. That junction is absolutely critical. And I hear a lot of people dismiss it because they only do employee or they only do customer. They don't do the whole thing. And so that's really important. And our research into the impact of having employees on the platform that you give your customers is continuing. And it's only showing results up and to the right for companies that are enlightened enough to equip their employees with the right feedback platform. It's a massive theme. I think everybody gets it. There's a ton of people getting into the space, but really it's very simple. If you can connect the customer experience to the employee that served them and understand how they are, do they have the tools to do their job? What's their feedback profile like over the last 2 years? How do they give feedback? How do they think about feedback? How do they think about you as their leader and coach and so on? You get a context that can better inform you to support the customer.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about company culture for a second, and I'd be remiss if I didn't actually just share your own score. So this is how your team rates you on Comparably. Fantastic culture. You do well on all of our platforms. You great scores from women and people of color. You've won a number of our recognitions. As you think about how you build a great company culture, what are the things that stand out for you? Like, what do you feel is most unique about the Medallia culture, and how, especially in a remote environment, are you bringing people together and not only maintaining but hopefully growing and building upon that culture?
Well, I think first of all, I did arrive at a great situation and a great time for the company, and I work for a great team, so I've been very lucky. So those scores are a reflection of how they think and how they build the company. So I'm kind of I'm riding along on that wave, to be honest with you. But I think that it's still work in progress. I think well, I want everyone to have all the opportunity and everything that's available to me. And I don't want to work for a bozo, and I don't think they should either. And I don't want to, risk my life commuting on the highways of California for hours at a time to do what I could do from a place I choose myself. So why shouldn't they have the same opportunity? And I consider that our exec team serves them and our customers and our shareholders. It's not that we are there because we're smart execs and we deserve to lead. And I actually think the constant opportunity to create feedback in safe spaces is really important. It's very important. And also, we're of a size, 2,400 people. We're getting to the limits of intimacy, right? But we're out of a size where anyone can Zoom me anytime, and they can ask me literally anything. I'll never dodge a question. There's nothing that they can't ask me. And I trust them. Trust is a big thing. And so I think these are just some of the things, but we're not perfect. There's a lot of work to do. There's a ton of work to do. First of all, we've got to make sure we now maintain or improve those scores. But I want every single person that walks into here to feel that we're loyal to them and that they have a fantastic opportunity. And they're going to be rewarded, they're going to earn, they're going to learn and enjoy their time. And nothing short of that is going to work for me, and it shouldn't work for them. And we're not perfect. We can fall down, we've got a lot of stuff to do. Yeah.
When you think about the next 5 years and what you're most excited about for the company that you're going to build and what it's going to become, what does that future Medallia look like? Who's the company that you're going to be in 5 or 10 years from today, and how it's going to be helping and servicing all these global businesses?
Well, that's a great question. Just to talk in numbers, our energy, our money, this year, our public projection is in the high 500s somewhere. So we'd like to be $1 billion plus cloud company, because that's more energy to spend on people and product and fun and enjoying ourselves, and more strength to reward our shareholders that have stayed with us and invested in us. I want to produce great returns for them, for all our staff. We absolutely lead the field in innovation. There's no doubt about it. And I'm always reticent to be overconfident and say things like that. but we absolutely lead the field in strategy and innovation. You can read it from other people's point of view. It's not just me saying it. And that's been hard fought and hard won, that position. We're going to monetize that over the next 5 years so that we can give everybody the things we want to give them. For me, it's the thrill of seeing people that if they leave the company, they go to bigger jobs and become CEOs of other companies, and they become better coaches and better leaders. But for me, it's the thrill of seeing them get fulfilled. You know, it's fantastic to see people create a product and bring it to market, to see their reaction, and also to be able to reward them for that. You know, I think that's really exciting. And to see our brand take a solid rightful place in this space, which is not the case yet. We're still a work in progress. We're 2 years and 10 months public company. It's young as a public company. And also to never let anybody down, you know, to work hard and never let anybody down, and to make this transition that you talk about, Jason, to be able to succeed in wherever the pendulum lands between virtual and physical, and to be a successful participant in that future, and to be ready, you know, to be ready. That's kind of, if there's a one-word motto for the company, it's ready, right? You know, to be ready for change and anything that will be thrown at us, you know, as the world evolves and changes. And I think we all learned that in the pandemic. Digital transformations have taken 48 hours instead of 48 weeks. You know, there's all kinds of acceleration of change. Be ready for that.
Yeah. Well, you've talked a lot today about, you know, the value of getting feedback. And, you know, I say it's, you know, you've got this incredible confidence and humility about you. And you've talked no less than, I think, a dozen times about your team. It's clear to see that you're living your values. Like, we talk a lot about being a company that stands for transparency. And, you know, I often tell my team, we're an organization that reflects tens of thousands of other businesses, company cultures. We have to have our ish together. Like, we can't throw stones in a glass house. And it's clear to see that you live the values of feedback and transparency and improvement. And, you know, thank you for taking your time today, Leslie, to share your life and career lessons with so many of us from those auspicious beginnings. And there's a lot of us that are here rooting on, you know, the awesome work that you're doing at Medallia with your team, and excited to see where you continue to go in these next years to come.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Jason. It's so good to see you. Congrats on all your success, and wonderful to spend time with you.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you for all of you that continue to turn in week after week for our show here with entrepreneur.com for leadership lessons for these If I Knew Then conversations. We actually never found out, Leslie, what your lessons would be for yourself in your 20s. So we're going to have you back on the show so we can hear what advice you'd give yourself to your 20-year-old self. You turned out pretty awesome and cool, so I don't think you should have changed much. But for everyone that continues to join us, thank you so much. Stay safe, stay sane, and wishing you all lots of success as things hopefully continue to get better and open up for many of us. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you, everybody.